Well, thank you. Ildikó Melis indiznikas bava tingni donjiba nido noki kinomage gamigam gnuja kaning bay mills. My name is Ildikó Melis, and you probably noticed that I'm not a native speaker of Anishinaabe. My native language is Hungarian, and I teach English at Bay Mills Community College for 13 years. And I do like languages, even though I teach English. And I was very excited at the opportunity of taking some Anishinaabe language classes too, and I encourage my students to do so. I have been here for 13 years, and I'm actually amazed at the growth of the tribal college movement, and even our small tribal college too. We, a couple of years ago, opened our first bachelor's program online only in early childhood education, which provides wonderful opportunities for many young women in the region who often have to stay at home taking care of family or children or holding a job, and this way it gives them an opportunity to educate themselves. And we are also getting ready to start a second bachelor's program in computer studies. So these things make me very happy, even though I am just an English teacher teaching English classes at all levels, from pre-college to 200 level research and argument writing classes. But I am very hopeful that by getting more students who are working towards higher degrees, they will appreciate more what we can offer them in teaching. So why do I have these mixed feelings? Yeah, because I know that writing classes are not the most popular classes. Many classes come to us testing into pre-college level, so they are not very happy. Also, a large number of students have negative experiences in English classes, or they have some anxiety, so it is not always a pleasant environment. Not to mention that in Michigan, as you can see, we have winter like a large part of the year, and right now as I speak, it's also around 50 degrees. So in this presentation, I would like to share some practices that are based on my research, and I have been doing research using surveys from my students, and I also encourage my students to do research that might benefit our teaching or the college. So one area is that I have always been interested in metaphors and the cognitive science built around the use of metaphors. So I want to share something about that. I would like to focus on one metaphor that we often use about our students, calling them digital natives. And I would like to raise some questions about that. And finally, I would like to show how I try to incorporate the Indigenous value system into the research assignments. So let me just briefly define that when I talk about metaphors, I'm not using it in the sense that literature scholars are using it, but I am following the Lakoff Johnson book that started in 1988, which considers metaphors universal cognitive devices and part of human language. And in fact, they are extremely important tools in human knowledge making, relating what we know through language to areas what we don't know. And metaphors are very insightful, but they can both hide and reveal certain aspects of new and old knowledge. And we can use metaphors on almost any level. If we want to introduce, say, complicated epistemological theoretical problems, you can use metaphors, and you can also use metaphors to illustrate how punctuation works. So let me show some examples. One small research that I have conducted was that I asked students, both in a 4-year college and in my 2-year tribal college, about what would they compare their experiences in a writing class to. So what is it like? Use a metaphor or a simile or a comparison. And some students said, well, writing an essay is like driving. You know exactly where you are going or what you want to say, but it can be kind of boring, or you might need a map, or sometimes you get completely lost. Other students, interestingly, many of these students were tribal college students. They said that writing is like therapy for them. And that was very interesting. And it shows that there are still some traumatic experiences that tribal students are struggling with, and they would like to use writing to help them with those experiences. However, the problem is that if they are taking a research writing class that focuses on exponential expository writing, then this may not be a good place for them to use writing that way. Well, many students say that a writing class is like hard work. There's a lot of homework, tests, and they have to write a lot. And finally, this is one of my favorite, when a student said that writing an essay is like jumping off a cliff. You never know where you end or if you will even survive. So this was very interesting, and I would like to encourage everyone to do a small exercise like this to get your class started, because it does reveal a lot of the negative or positive sentiments and confusion about writing, and these are feelings that students bring to the class, and these feelings do affect their success and the way they are learning. And I haven't done too much research on that, but one thing that I learned was that the students who compared writing to some kind of chores, like doing the dishes, I don't like it, but I know it's useful for me and it has to be done, they tend to be more successful in the writing class than students who sometimes have kind of more romantic expectations about using writing to express themselves or who they are, which could be a very important function, but not necessarily in the kind of writing class that we are offering at Bamias. So again, I try to use many comparisons and analogies as I teach. And one source of my inspiration and learning for that was when I myself took a beading class. And on the right, you can see that I actually was not very successful with my beading, but I'm still very proud because I completed my project, and I did learn a lot about beading and also about what I don't know about beading and what I would need to learn more about beading. So the writing and beading analogy is very helpful, because I think I consider writing just like beading kind of a craft and art that takes practice, observation, using models. You have to make some plans, you have to decide what kind of pattern you are using, and you also have to choose your style, the colors. Just like in writing, you have to make some decisions about what kind of language, sentence structure to use, what is appropriate for the genre or what is not, what exactly is the genre, like are we making a medicine bag or are we making a bracelet? Those are very different things, just like a summary response essay is different from a research paper. In February, I believe we had a Zoom conference for tribal college writing instructors, and I was really inspired by Orlando White from Diné College, who showed how he uses the Diné medicine wheel to help students understand the writing process. And I think that's a good example of using a metaphor or an analogy that relates to the student's experience. And it's interesting because I also use the Anishinaabe medicine wheel when I teach the outline, which you can probably guess is not a very popular topic in the writing class, and many students say that they don't really want an outline. So in one class, I looked at the medicine wheel on the wall, and I told students that, do you guys realize that the medicine wheel, the way Anishinaabe people use it, is basically an outline, because it organizes various layers of knowledge that when storytellers use the medicine wheel, they go in a certain order, you know, they present the 4 directions from east to west, or when they talk about the 4 sacred plants, you know, they use those 4 areas, and they don't skip around and talk about sage and then they talk about sweetgrass, but there is a certain order. So that actually made the students think, and somehow they became a little bit less grudging about the outlines. And they also asked me, like, why are we writing 3 paragraph essays in the class when, you know, the medicine wheel has 4 parts? And I said, well, that's a good question. You don't have to write 3 body paragraphs. That's just a basic template. If you want, you can write 4 body paragraphs. And many of my tribal students, lo and behold, or before, were complaining about, you know, how much do we have to write. They started writing 4 body paragraph essays, which were longer, and actually they came out very nicely. And we also discussed how that structure changes the balance of ideas. Now, the APS citation is another not highly popular topic in the research writing course. And I also, you know, was kind of troubled because non-tribal college instructors often tell me that, oh, it must be very hard for you to teach citation because natives, they just, you know, use information, whatever. And I started kind of paying more attention to decide that it's actually absolutely not true, because I attended storytellers' presentations, and I did not encounter even one storyteller who would not mention respectfully the name of an elder, a grandparent, or a friend of a grandparent whom they learned that story from. And actually, even in that beading class, they were mentioning several elders and members of the community who used a certain pattern. So I was trying to relate this value to my tribal students and mention that when we are using parenthetical citations, basically that's our way of putting a little token of respect for someone's knowledge that we incorporated into our work. Now, to go into more philosophical and deeper areas, I have been using Robin Wall Kimmerer's work in my classes. I ask students to read some of her essays, and then she makes a comparison between traditional ecological knowledge and science-based ecological knowledge. And I don't want to go into all the details, but it's just fascinating how she uses metaphors, and she compares science-based knowledge to fortresses that are kind of closed and not very open. You know, they strictly protect their own research paradigm and ways of doing things. Then she talks about a possible relationship between different ways of knowledge making, just like 2 rivers are running parallel. They do not interfere with each other, but they each have their own ways and respect, or a garden that is a model of more of a symbiosis of different ways of knowledge making living together. I find that actually very interesting and thought-provoking, and I just wish that science people were more interested in this kind of epistemological thinking and ways of approaching different ways of knowledge and incorporating that into their work. And finally, let me point out that there are many visual metaphors and analogies that we use. The Venn diagram is basically a visual metaphor that is trying to represent sometimes very complex relationships in a visual way by using these circles. Now, one popular analogy that everybody uses is that our students are digital natives. And I want to use this example to illustrate that the metaphor is not only insightful, but sometimes it hides issues. Because what this metaphor suggests is that our students already know everything about technology, so there's no problem, right? COVID, let's just move into online, the whole thing, and there's not going to be any problem. And I think it's not quite so. So as some of my research shows is that just because our students seem to be on their phone 24/7, it doesn't mean that they understand technology or they are aware of the ways that technology changes human knowledge in the 21st century. So when I conducted a short faculty survey and I got 12 responses, 8 of our instructors agreed with me that our students think they know more about technology than what they actually know. So then the next issue that I was trying to research in this faculty survey is like, what exactly is the definition of technology knowledge? What do we mean by information or web literacy? And there's no universally agreed definition, and there's no assessment. So, as much as we don't like reading and writing tests, but there is some standard, but there's no standard of what kind of technology knowledge would be required or necessary for a student to get started in college successfully. Elementary school teachers use the term digital citizenship, and they teach children how to be nice online, not to do bullying, not to steal illegal material, look at inappropriate material. But other than that, we don't really know what is it that we expect from our digital native students to know. And I have to tell you that I do spend an awful lot of time having to teach students how to change font or set margin in a writing class when I feel like I should not be teaching this. So in my survey, I also asked the other instructors, like, whose responsibility should this be to teach or assess the level of technology knowledge? And these are the answers that I got. Most people say that it should be taught in high schools. Others say it should be taught in a special class, and we do have a special introduction to computer technology class, but they don't necessarily teach the kinds of skills that we would need in our writing classes. And they definitely do not teach information literacy. They do not teach students how to evaluate the information online. And then finally, the libraries do extremely a lot, but they don't have special funding for that. So they really are struggling with so many other more issues. And in our college, the library serves the community. So it's not even an academic library that is designed to serve academic research. And finally, nobody agreed with that all faculty should teach students how to use technology. So we would like to take this for granted and consider our students digital natives, but we also know that they really are not. And then finally, access. Many people believe that nowadays access is not a problem. Everybody already has phones and internet, and my experience is not exactly like that. And I'm particularly concerned because at Bay Mills, we really move very rapidly towards online. And I think COVID made some of these processes kind of irreversible, but I still know that internet service can be random, unreliable, and definitely more expensive. I don't know, but I do pay $80 a month just for my internet. And I think that this is really outrageous. And I read Donalon's 2017 study where she examined internet access on tribal territories, and she supported my conclusions. Now, finally, this is short in-class assignment that I want to show you again to kind of conclude how I use analogies and how I try to relate them to mission statements and to that component of trying to make students feel at home as researchers and also as tribal members. So on the first class of the research writing class, I drew this circle on the board and I called that the planet of research. And I asked the students to draw a little stick figure of themselves and put their initials. And depending on how they feel about research being part of their life or being important to them, put their character as close to that planet as they can. And as you can see in this picture, and I have been doing this every semester for years, and I can tell you that it looks like the students are getting closer and closer to that planet, but still nobody, that's myself, who is on the planet. And there's some students who put themselves way too far. You can't even see because your images are covering that. So they feel like they have got nothing to do with research, and research is scary, and that's only for people who work in labs. So, well, of course, after this, we have to talk about what exactly do we mean by research. And I asked students, like, did you check the weather this morning? And is that research when you check the weather? Or did you check how your cousin is doing on Facebook? I think that's also research. So I try to point out that actually there's no such thing these days that you don't do any research or you are not related to research, because everybody does research, and there's so much information out there that our problem is not whether we do or not do research, but our problem is not to spend too much time, not to be distracted, and to focus and to find information that is useful. So when I give them the research writing assignment, I try to infuse it with those indigenous values of knowledge making that I also learned from Robin Wall Kimmerer. So my first idea is that research is a responsibility, and I assign topic. Well, actually, I write up a list of topics and the students draw a topic. So I don't allow them just to use a random topic. And why? Because I tell them that if you get the job and you work for your tribe or work for another community service, nobody's going to tell you, oh, please go out and do any research on whatever interests you. But they will start from a problem. For example, can you do some research on why our community members are not attending the gym more often? Or do we need to do something about smoking? Or would tribal employees be happy if there were water fountains, drinking water fountains in tribal buildings? Actually, that was a real project that one of my students did. So first I assign a topic, and then when I allow them to choose a topic, then they actually choose topics that are more related to practical problems. I also, going back to the beadwork analogy, I assume that students learn from models, and our course books always have models, but they are not exactly the kind of assignments that I want the students to work on. So I show them models from past classes of students that were successful, and it usually works very well for some students. I would also like to emphasize that research is service. So I want the students to share that information and not just write to me so that they get a good grade, but write something that someone else might find useful and that someone else can learn from. And finally, my favorite metaphor for research is Sean Wilson's research ceremony. I think a research paper has to be celebrated, so I want the students to put together a short PowerPoint presentation, to share it, and to get the compliments, the questions and the comments, just like it is done in real life. So these are the values that I'm using. So the conclusion is, and actually I could talk more about that, but I don't want now, that we all live on the planet of research now. And that's not just a happy thing. This is very scary. What this also means is that there's a lot of good information, a lot of bad information out there. Nobody knows how to select it, and this is not going to go away. So I'm kind of paraphrasing David Weinberger's book title that says that this planet is too big for us to know. There's too much knowledge. Nobody's going to be able to know everything. but everybody is the expert of something, and fortunately or unfortunately, they are sharing that something online, and we have to sort out the good from the bad. And basically, the smartest person in the room is the room, which means that I cannot present myself as the most knowledgeable person in the classroom, but I have to rely on what my students bring to the classroom, and they also have to rely on each other. So basically, this is what I incorporated in my teaching based on some of my research. And I would not want to say that these are best practices, but these are my best practices. To be more modest, these are practices that I have been using and they work. If you are interested, I can share some of my references and the readings that I know. And now I am ready for questions, and thank you so much for paying attention.